All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back. Taking a look at the tropics. Today is Saturday, September 21st, 2024. This is your afternoon tropical update. Today, we are focusing on the Western Caribbean, where our next area of interest has been pegged by the National Hurricane Center. We've had it on our map for several days now, but there's not been a lot going on in this area. Today, we do have some disorganized thunderstorm activity, some broad rotation in the Western Caribbean. We think all this is eventually going to pull up to the northwest near the Yucatan Peninsula and then begin to turn some component of northeast as we go into late next week. A tropical storm or hurricane impact is very likely along the northern Gulf Coast, somewhere from the panhandle of Florida all the way over to somewhere near Louisiana. So we're going to talk about what that we have today. We still don't have an organized named storm yet, so the details are going to be very sketchy, but we're going to talk about what we're looking at for the pattern and what the latest is. National Hurricane Center's afternoon update, 60% chance on the system, although we do note that's still 0% in the next 48 hours. Now, we might actually have the newer one. Let's see. We do. I've been recording this off and on here for a little bit. So, yeah. So, still 60% as of 2 p.m. 48 hours, still 0%. So, we don't have anything likely to form in the next day or two. We think this is probably going to be into early next week before we start seeing something happen. There are some other areas of interest on the map, but none of these look like they're going to be of any impact to the eastern U.S. So, this system is what we're going to be talking about. Going over to tropical tidbits, looking at the visible satellite imagery from the Ghost 16 here today. And one thing we do notice is a broad area of low pressure and spin has developed. We have a lot of spinning going on over Central America. This is what we call the Central American gyre pattern, very common this time of year. Big background area of rotation. We have a deep trough digging into this area. See these clouds racing across Cuba and the Bahamas, all associated with a strong upper trough. And this is ventilating this part of the Western Caribbean. It's causing thunderstorms. And overall, in the low levels, we have this broad cyclonic rotation going on. So you're going to see a lot of storminess and thunderstorms in this region for the next couple of days. But I do want to point out that upstream, we really don't have a strong tropical wave moving in here. You have almost a very, very small one right here, but there's not really a whole lot going on. The Eastern Caribbean is very quiet. And I point that out for a reason. We look at the Hurricane Center's TFAB, Tropical Analysis Forecast Branch analysis here today. They don't have any tropical waves analyzed in this area. So when you get this pattern, there's really two ways you can kick a tropical system off with it. Either A, which is what we're going to have happen, is this broad area slowly moves northward and it slowly rotates in a little tighter each time until eventually you get some kind of coherent tropical cyclone out of it. The other way is that you have a breeding ground of tropical moisture, lift, background vorticity, etc. You have the area primed for a tropical system, and then a tropical wave comes along, moves through the Eastern Caribbean, hits this point, and then it spins off into a much more coherent tropical storm from there. Now, that second one's not going to apply here. So what we're instead going to see is a big portion of the monsoon trough lift north with this, move across the Yucatan, and slowly try to develop from there. GFS forecast model shows this pretty well. This is 18Z today. It has that broad background rotation pretty well set already. Same thing, low pressure over Central America. And again, over the next few days, you're going to watch this slowly move to the northwest. So we'll progress this model through the weekend and go into Monday afternoon. You can see the area of rotation has moved further north, but it's still kind of messy. There's also likely going to be a system over here in the Eastern Pacific. So you may have development at both ends of this elongated area of low pressure. But even into Monday is no tropical system yet. So we go into Tuesday and then eventually into Wednesday. And on the GFS, this is when we might start having an area of interest try to form. This is a more compact area of low pressure, and there may even be a smaller low or so inside of this that might try to become a tropical system. What's going to eventually happen, enough thunderstorms fire on this, and the circulation slowly starts to condense, and then eventually you get enough thunderstorm activity where a low pressure center forms and a small one that the storm kind of winds up anchoring around. But it's a messy, complicated process that takes a while. So at this point, we're into Wednesday afternoon when we start having a system form. So at this point, we're somewhere between the western tip of Cuba and the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. Computer models agree very well at this point. This is the European and the GFS through the middle of next week. European shows most of its members somewhere north of Yucatan. And I want to point out that a lot of these models are now indicating whatever form stays offshore. Like if I were to draw the Yucatan Peninsula for you, that's the Yucatan's outline. So notice how other than a brief interaction like right here, there's not much land interaction. This is true also on the GFS, although more members go over land, there's a good portion of members that stay over the water. And the origin is probably going to be somewhere right here, and it's going to move just over the Yucatan and then start turning north from there. Good agreement on the models to that point. So we're in Wednesday. We have a messy, broad tropical system depression storm, PTC, if we want to put watches and warnings out for the Yucatan. Something semi-organized to potentially organized is going to be sitting very near the Yucatan Peninsula's northern tip, or maybe the very edge of the Western Caribbean sometime on Wednesday. Okay, we're at that point. Now we've got to look north. We've got to look up here and say, well, what is the steering flow doing over the northern Gulf of Mexico, the central eastern U.S. that's going to dictate where the storm goes? Does it drift towards Texas? Does it go racing across Miami? Does it go north from there? And that answer is we look north and we look at the upper level steering flow back across the U.S. This is the GFS 12Z on Wednesday. This is Wednesday morning. And we have a few features to talk about. Number one, we have a large ridge of high pressure over the Four Corners. We have another ridge associated with the Bermuda Azores high over the eastern coast of Florida and over the middle of the U.S., over Missouri, Kansas, kind of Illinois area. We have a closed area of low pressure with a trough extending down towards Texas. In this setup, this would cause some sort of northerly steering flow over the Gulf. This high is going to rotate this way. This high rotates this way, but it's pretty far off, and this low is going to be pushing wind in some sort of direction here. So imagine, again, Wednesday morning, we have our tropical storm or whatever down here near the Yucatan. It's going to want to move some component of north. Now, this isn't a type of steering flow that's going to pick this up and slingshot it up the East Coast. This is more of a gentle nudge northward. There's not a lot of room and not a lot of strong steering flow here. So what we think, and the consensus has been from our models so far, that whatever does move north is eventually going to move north kind of slow. But there's disagreement on how this pattern exactly looks. The basic components are now coming into view, but the specifics are a little different because I can take you over to the European model. Same time, 12Z Wednesday, 7 a.m. Wednesday local time in central U.S. time, or 8 a.m. Eastern U.S. time. Same features, same high pressure near the Four Corners, same high over Florida, and same kind of low, but you can see there's things that are different. If I were to go back to the GFS, notice that this low is stronger, this high is weaker, but then on the European model, this high is stronger. So what would this look like? Well, this would put a much stronger high over the Gulf of Mexico, which means the European would probably have our storm down here and not so much over the tip. It would probably be more off to the west, and this would likely take longer. The storm would probably not move very much in this case. This low would have less influence over it, and it would probably have to wait for this high to break down a little bit and then move northward. We can sanity check this with the GEFS and the EPS ensembles. If you saw our post on Facebook, you know kind of about the ensemble models and what we talked about. GEFS ensembles still show that trough and still show the weaker high over Florida, which would again give the storm some northerly room to move. European ensembles still show the same thing, but again, kind of showing this high being stronger over Florida. So this is probably going to be the deciding factor. Is this high ridged out into the Gulf, meaning our storm has to move off to the west first and then start coming around? Or is this high going to be weaker, i.e. GEFS or GFS, where there's enough room for our system to make an earlier turn to the north and move in more to the east? That will likely determine how this plays out. We can see here in the low levels how this might add up. So we'll back the GFS surface chart up. So you can see on the GFS, something spins up near the Yucatan Peninsula. This is late Wednesday afternoon, early Thursday morning. We go into Friday morning, and something basically just moves pretty much due east. And again, high pressure over Florida. So this just moves it around the high and into the eastern Gulf Coast, probably like Panhandle of Florida. 988, a large and kind of sloppy system. This would be probably upper end tropical storm, Cat 1 hurricane, but it'd be kind of a broad, messy storm, wouldn't be very well organized. Euro is kind of the same thing. So you're going, okay, well, 988, 987, same broad storm. Okay, we're all good, right? Look at the difference. This is on Sunday. So if I back this up, on Wednesday afternoon, the Euro sees a lot weaker storm because there's a lot more high pressure influence up here. But notice how much different this looks, how the barbs are more like this. Again, our high on the Euro is pushing this storm off to the west, and then it has to kind of come around over like to the east or the western Gulf on Friday and then begin to move north as the high breaks down and moves back over Florida and it has enough room. So, with this in mind, I think we can come to at least some basic consensus here, and that is if we go back to the GFS, I think what we're going to wind up with, given how the ensembles look, is that if you kind of correct the Euro biases a little bit and the GFS biases, I think you kind of land somewhere with what the GEFS has. A ridge kind of extended over Florida, a trough of some kind lazily sitting here that's partially cut off, by the way. A lot of the jet stream energy is moving around this trough, so it's not going to move very fast or very far. And you're going to have some kind of gateway, probably from about Panama City to about central Louisiana, open for this storm to come in. I think right now the betting favorite would probably be the Alabama-Mississippi border to maybe Panama City. But, I mean, honestly, I probably want to move this over towards Apalachicola. I think those are your broad goalposts, and then there's a narrow corridor in here that's at a higher risk. But I think there's very unlikely this is going to move all the way towards Texas because this high is probably not going to let it come much further west. And I think that the solutions that drag it over South Florida are going away because there's too much model guidance that suggests this high will likely be protecting a lot of Florida. Now, the high could be weaker. We could be talking about a backdoor into the Big Bend, and we could still put a lot of the northern Florida peninsula in play. Don't discount that. And again, if this goes much further to the west and that trough winds up picking it up more north, we could be talking about central Louisiana, like New Orleans, right where Francine just hit. So don't discount either end of the goalpost, but I think that's what we're talking about. So the basic consensus is a big, broad storm that hopefully will not be able to develop all that much before it moves north. But I do caution that if this winds up lingering in the southern Gulf of Mexico for another day or two, you could be talking about a stronger storm. I think for now, both tropical storm and hurricane are on the table. Major hurricane isn't off the table, but given this setup, it would be a little less likely, hopefully, but it's really too early to make those kind of calls. I just think that what we can generally say is that this is going to be developing around Tuesday, Wednesday. It's going to be somewhere near the northern edge of the Yucatan Tuesday, Wednesday, and it's going to move some component of north to northeast from there and likely come in somewhere in that range Friday into the weekend. That's about all we have right now. I don't want to go much further than that. We're going to start refining these models. When we start getting a little bit more organization, we can start getting our regional hurricane models going on this, Invest, spaghetti model charts. A lot more stuff's going to run. Hurricane hunters, I think they're thinking Monday, Tuesday to go out there and take a look. There's not much to look at yet, so they'll be out there early next week. We got a lot more to talk about with this storm, but that's the early broad basic consensus. You were on the eastern to northern Gulf Coast from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, and even the rest of the peninsula of Florida, especially in the northern half of the peninsula of Florida. You need to make sure you're reviewing your hurricane plan and closely following updates, but it's going to be a few more days. We'll be back probably through the rest of the weekend and early next week with more updates. I'll have constant stuff on the page. We're going to get it knocked out, but that's the latest I have for you guys today. So we'll keep watching it. We'll keep tracking it. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for watching and have a good one.